Dear listeners, welcome to a new special series episode of the podcast about enzymes and molecules, where we interview directors of institutes. I am Roberta Foresti, professor of biochemistry at the University of PARRC and working as a researcher at the Mondor Institute of Biomedical Research in France. Our guest today is Dr. Alain Tedgui, Director of Research Emeritus at INSERM. Dr. Tedgui has an extensive experience in running the Paris Cardiovascular Research Center, PARCC, in Paris, and we will discuss his 10-year mandate as director of PARCC, as well as his journey as a researcher in the field of atherosclerosis. Good afternoon, Alain.
Hello, Roberta. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's great to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much. I'm really eager to know more about your research and management experiences and so on. What projects are you working on now that you are emeritus professor? I suppose that you have much more time to dedicate to science without the pressures of management responsibilities and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I retired 3 years ago now. But I'm still emeritus at INSERM and still in contact with my former colleagues and researchers who were my students, but now grew up and are all very senior. But I'm very keen to continue working with them, and in particular, there is one project which is quite important to me. I started something like probably let's say 25 years ago, working on immunoinflammation in atherosclerosis, and that was the very beginning of the story. And at that time, we used to work, of course, by using mouse models. Okay, and we discover a number of anti-inflammatory mechanisms that protect against atherosclerosis. And the beauty is that today, one of my former students, now professor at Cambridge, Ziad Malat, is carrying out clinical trials to see whether that can be translated in the clinical arena. And in fact, it just obtained the first results of a phase 2 trial, showing that indeed we can, by using, it's not yet published, so I can't tell you too much about what it is, but very novel immunotherapy can be used in post-MI in patients who suffer myocardial infarction, and you may have some anti-inflammatory action and hopefully effect on clinical outcomes. So I'm close to that project, and also a project which is conducted by your old friend of mine, David Klatzmann, an immunologist at La Pitié, and funded by the European Union, that started a year ago. And we try to imagine optimal reagent using this kind of approach to be developed in humans.
I see. Very interesting that you can now move from your previous, as you say, in vivo studies in animals and see the progression.
Absolutely, yeah.
That you say 25 years ago, I think already is indicating the time that is needed to really develop ideas and really make important discoveries.
The first paper in this field that we published on the role of IL-10 in atherosclerosis was in fact published in 1999. But of course, you can imagine that we started
much earlier.
But earlier, the experiment probably it was in 95, something like that. And that was the very first path to that new avenue for using anti-inflammatory immunotherapy in atherosclerosis. in coronary syndromes.
So I'm looking forward to see these important results coming out from the clinical trials. Your journey brought you from Algeria to France, where obviously your career flourished. Could you tell us more about your origins? Why did you decide to come to France?
That long story. I mean, I was born in Algeria, in North Africa. And at that time, in 62, as you must know, Algeria became independent. And so my family was a Jewish family in Algeria. As others, we had to move to France. And I was about 8.5 years old when we arrived in Paris, and I started my studies. And at that time, I went first to the high school and then to the university in Paris. And I did. My parents was very keen that I do medical studies, but I was a bit stubborn at that time and rejected that idea. I didn't want to be a medical doctor. So, and I was quite good in mathematics. So I did mathematics, applied mathematics at the university. But I was quite fascinated by the medical research, not medical practice, but knowing how the body works, how the disease, what the mechanisms of the disease. So that's why, I mean, thanks to my meeting with Bernard Levy, who is a famous physiologist, cardiovascular physiologist. He introduced me in that field of cardiovascular physiology, I would say. And so I did a postdoc in London between 1979 and 1981, in London, in Professor Carroll's laboratory, who run at that time a laboratory that was dedicated to looking particularly at the hemodynamics in humans. So it was a mixture of cardiologists, so medical doctors, medical scientists, and mathematicians, physicists, mathematicians. So that's where I started to learn more about, I would say, vascular biology. So that was also the very beginning of the vascular biology as a field.
Mm-mm.
And when I came back to Paris, I was recruited at INSERM in Bernard Lévy's laboratory at La Riboisière. And that was 83. I started my own research program on atherosclerosis. So I learned, because I didn't know nothing in biology, in biochemistry, in signaling, absolutely nothing.
Because you did mathematics and then you moved to...
Yeah. My training is in applied mathematics, so it's pure equations. Yeah, absolutely.
Was there something in your mathematics training that you found anyway useful and could be transferable to your...
Yeah, I mean, for a while, I used to make modelization models, mathematic models of circulation, the circulatory system. Okay, but then I moved totally into pure biology. That was I was more interested in that instead of continuing doing mathematical models. So I skipped that activity, and by the beginning of 19th, I did purely experimental model, especially on first on using rabbits, because that was the model that was used at that time for investigating atherosclerosis, and then later on I moved to mice, because in 92, 93, the first ApoE knockout mice, LDLR knockout mice were generated, and then it became the standard model for exploring atherosclerosis mechanisms.
Yes, so if I just go back to what you said at the beginning, it's a journey that was, from Algeria to France, it's a journey that was dictated by the politics rather than you deciding that France were your best. But perhaps your move and doing the postdoc in London was instead dictated by your real interest in doing science rather than maybe medical studies and medical practicing. So you identify the lab in London as a very good one for you to continue your training.
Absolutely. So that was a very, you're perfectly correct, because my training in applied mathematics, I could have continued to be an engineer in anything. In terms of, I could have done meteorology,
Yes.
oceanography, because they use a lot of equations in fluid mechanics, because my training is in fluid mechanics. Okay, so I could have done, I could became an engineer, but I
Yes.
didn't to become an engineer, and I was really appealed by research, experimental research. So that's what, and you're right. My postdoc in London was really very important to me, and I started, to be in contact with people working in that field, and that was the very beginning. And then after, I also, by through meetings, I contacted one important scientist who was very important to me, because I never had a real mentor, because I always learned by myself. But I would say my by just participating in meetings at that time, I contacted Zemur Glagov. And Zemur Glagov is a famous pathologist from Chicago. So he's an MD. He was a French speaking. So we became very friends. He was, of course, older than me, but he knew atherosclerosis absolutely as nobody else. So I learned a lot by by contacting and
Exchanging with him.
engaging with him, absolutely. And as a pathologist, so he did know the real what atherosclerosis was really. Not in rabbit, not in mice, but in humans. So I learned a lot at his contact.
Very interesting your approach, because you identified some people that you knew could really help you to understand the problem, and with whom you could discuss because you had this common interest. And I think that's really interesting, and it's great actually. I don't know if nowadays the young people, the young researchers have this kind of approach, but I know that it used to be more like that, but I think it was very fruitful in a way, fruitful and useful.
Right, and especially, if we look at the COVID periods, when researchers had to participate in meeting just by Zoom. So that's absolutely, it's terrible, because the most in your research activity, what you do is just contact during coffee breaks and dinner. Otherwise, just listening conference you can do by Zoom. So that's perfect. But if you don't have that face-to-face contact, you're losing a lot. And
Absolutely. Yes. Um, we continue with the questions, but it's very interesting. I would like to know more about the story, but um, why and how was PARCC created? It's a it's a recent institute, if we want to say it like this.
yeah, it opened officially in 2009. So
Yeah.
you're right. It's not an old institute, but all the story started when back in the 70s, the government uh, decided to close three large hospitals in the West Bank of Paris. You must know, I don't know if you remember Laennec Hospital, Broussais Hospital, Boussicaut, that were very famous and well known old hospitals in Paris, very famous. And the government at that time decided to close and to merge all the three in a new high-tech, very modern hospital, which is the Georges-Pompidou European Hospital, okay? Which is just close to Eiffel Tower.
Yes.
In arrondissement, okay? But that project was supposed to have a research center because it's a hospital, is a university hospital or hospital university, okay? The CHU, okay? But for several reasons, and in particular, money reasons, the hospital it took 30 euros for the hospital to reopen in 2000, okay? But without research center for the sake of lack of money, okay? So, but the medical authorities continue to think into having that research center because you cannot have a university hospital without research. So then the hospital opened in 2000, and then by six years later, they raised amount of money to start building the research center, the research building. Okay. And then I was at that time in 2006, I was director of a INSERM unit at Lariboisière. So people in charge of that project came and see me to ask if I was interested in moving from Lariboisière to Georges-Pompidou Hospital. And I say, yes, why not? I mean, but at that time I was supposed to move only my team, not being a director. But with time, and in 2000, by the end of 2006, they launched a call for looking for a director of the center who was supposed to gather a number of teams that will occupy and make research in that building. It's a building of 4,000 square meters. So, you can accommodate something like, at that time, something like 10 teams. So I applied first as a candidate for the directorship. After I was in the short list of two who were interviewed by beginning 2007 by an international jury. And then I was appointed by INSERM, PHP, Hospital de Paris, and the university. At that time was Paris Diderot, so it's now University Paris Cité. Okay, so the three institutions appointed me as a director of this center. The center, the building was, the stone just started at that time, okay? It was totally finished by 2009 only. But in 2007, I was in charge of...
You were already...
I was already in charge of recruiting teams to move and also to apply as a unit, INSERM unit for evaluation by our, HERS agency, etc., and so on. Okay, so to make the story short, 2007 I was appointed director, and 2009 we moved, 8 teams, mainly from Collège de France and Lariboisière. All together, we moved to Hôpital Européen Georges-Pompidou in that new center, which is absolutely just adjacent, close to the hospital. So
Yes.
it's really next door.
I have two questions in relation to this. Was the call an international call for directors? They were open to anybody from abroad, from France, from...
Absolutely. Yeah. The call mentions that, in fact, after political discussion about what the center should what should be done in that center, they decided to dedicate mostly to cardiovascular research, even though non-exclusively. Okay. So, and then there have been, I don't remember, but something like 10 or 12 applicants from all over the world. But in fact, they just
shortlisted.
a short of to a German guy and myself.
I see. It's important, I think, to have this vision of, opening up to what kind of, good people we could get in order to direct a new institute, which obviously had, I'm sure, very big ambitions. And it's great that they appointed you at the end, an Algerian person living in France. And I have another question. Did you have any say at all on how the building was going to be, the laboratories were going to be designed, and also, of course, on the topic of the main topic that would become cardiovascular for the park?
So in fact, no, I mean, so in terms of structurally speaking, I mean, in terms of architecture, it's absolutely fascinating because the research center, if you come, you already.
I have been, yes.
Okay, you don't see any difference between the research center and the hospital itself.
Yes.
Because in fact, the architectural project was done by Zublena, a famous architect who did the stadium at Port Clichy. And so Zublena did that project in the 70s, 80s. Okay, so the project, he did the project for hospital and the research center. So when they decided, by the first stone was laid something like 2007 or 8. Okay, so the architecture of the building was done. So we didn't have any word to say regarding how to do the rooms, the bench, etc. However, and so that's first for question regarding the structure. Regarding what to do, what the objective and the research that's been done. So that has been a long discussion between the INSERM, hospital, and university. And I was not involved in that discussion, okay? Because Storm wanted to have mainly cancer done in that center, and other wanted to have mainly cardiovascular. And there was also a third option that was seriously taken into consideration at that time. It's to have mainly resources, it's just facilities.
I see.
For a number, essentially from the professor at the hospital to make their research. So that would have been, a number of omics, microscopy, imaging, etc., etc. I mean, PCR, molecular biology. So technical facilities, okay?
Yes.
A plateau, a technical plateau. That's what.
Mm-mm.
So that was absolutely not my option, because I say I want to do science, not to be a manager of platforms, so that you can just hire an engineer to manage the platform. I want to do science in this building. So finally, the final decision was made by INSERM and the Paris hospital and the university, and that was to say, okay, we accept you to have mostly cardiovascular, but be open, also have an open mind for also having other disciplines. And in fact, when we opened the one of the first 8 teams was Professor Eric Dartour, who is an immunology guy working in cancer and angiogenesis. So, at that time, he was involved in anti-VEGF as a treatment for certain types of cancers. So that was perfect. I mean, we had oncology, and also he's an immunologist. So I mean, we had a number of connections. So that was perfect. But at the end of the day, the center is cardiovascular, because it's a Paris Cardiovascular Research Center, the PARCC.
Absolutely. When we moved to France in 2011, and I remember we already knew about this institute from abroad, and it was, in our mind, it was recognized as a center of excellence for cardiovascular research. And I think it has really maintained this identity, which is, again, very important for the recognition and for attracting also, of course, scientists that are, important and interested in the field. So I think you've been able to really, give a good direction and again, working on the identity of the institute, although you were not involved. In fact, one important question here is, why do you think you were selected for the job? Since you said there were many applicants and they shortlisted the German guy and you. What do you think were your...
No, because I think I developed the idea that in fact what I wanted to have is having making good science. Okay, because all the question at that time, because I was myself involved in atherosclerosis, so at that time I was quite well known already in the field of atherosclerosis. So people were really afraid that I was going to build a institute of atherosclerosis, okay, and having only atherosclerosis in that building, and that was absolutely not my view, but that was what others were afraid of, okay. And in fact, when I was interviewed, I developed the idea that we don't need to have 10 teams working in atherosclerosis close each other. That doesn't make sense, because only because we cannot have 10 excellent teams in atherosclerosis in France, and we are not in position in recruiting teams from abroad, to come and join us and doing only atherosclerosis. That was absolutely doesn't make sense. Okay, so what I proposed is to recruit teams for their already excellency in cardiovascular research, whatever it is. And in fact, we started with teams, and that continue to be the case, in hypertension, of course, in acute sudden cardiac death, in also imaging, in angiogenesis, in heart failure, and so on, and also covering a lot of disciplines, so cellular and molecular basic science, but not only genetics, and also translational research, not clinical research, because clinical research is done at the hospital. So it doesn't make sense to do clinical research in our center. But definitely translational research, experimental research, and also cell culture, in vitro, in vivo. So all that kind of research to the benefit of production of new knowledge. So that was the real goal, is to speed up the generation of new knowledge in cellular and molecular mechanisms of cardiovascular disease. But not for so we because we have international how do you say advisory board. Sorry, we have of course international advisory board, and I always had the question. So we are quite dispersed in terms of even in cardiovascular, but still it's hypertension, heart failure, atherosclerosis. Why don't you focus more on your main interest? I would say atherosclerosis, again. And I say no, because we cannot generate having all in cardiovascular the quality that we have in the building as different teams, and the collaboration are real with that step up the collaboration through the different tips between hypertension, atherosclerosis, heart failure or myocardial infarction, and atherosclerosis. Even we also publish a paper in Nature Communication between the group on oncology and my team in atherosclerosis. So
Yes,
So that,
I can see it would have been too restrictive to focus just on atherosclerosis. Absolutely.
or hypertension. We also could have built a building on hypertension. There are sufficient teams working on hypertension in France to say, okay, come in to Pompidou and do your hypertension research
And it's
activity. But having 10 excellent team in hypertension, this is not realistic.
yes.
Having one or two or three teams with different approach in genetics, in secondary hypertension, etc., etc. And all very good and excellent in their field. So that was the goal, and my feeling, my opinion, my spirit. Yeah.
So we could say that probably the committee that selected you could see, first of all, that you were a very passionate scientist and you had your own expertise in a particular field of cardiovascular research, and that you also had a vision, a strong vision for the institute, for how the institute could develop, covering different aspects of cardiovascular research. From what you're telling me, I think you would have convinced me if I had been in the committee because of
Uh,
the way you explained to me.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. Yes, but I mean, you summarize quite well. Yeah, so I think that yeah, so that was the main reason. Yeah, it's that thing because in fact, to be true, I mean the other candidate had really a very different opinion uh, of mine. Is having he's a very well known guy in hypertension, and what he wanted to to develop a center doing a very sophisticated genetically modified animals, mice, looking at hypertension mechanisms. So all with having that different transgenic mice modifying that gene, and looking at hypertension.
Yeah. Yeah, I can say that, again, I agree with you that I find it very, very limited to just focus on one subject.
I
And
think for one, two, three teams, but not 10. I mean, actually, we started with 8 teams, and my second mandate, 8 years later, so in 20, 2010, I mean, we were 14 teams.
yes.
So,
And I would say perhaps the advantage also of this approach is that some mechanisms of disease, triggering disease, are common, even though we are
so
looking at, and the fact that you have different diseases, people developing different research around different diseases still related to the cardiovascular system means that they could exchange much more, in my opinion, their expertise, because some of the mechanism could be in common and you could join forces. Maybe I'm studying this mechanism that is very important also in this other disease, and therefore also stimulating collaboration between the different teams of the institute.
absolutely correct. I mean that, and the example, for instance, I did not mention. We also have a very good, very famous team in kidney disease, and mainly oriented on the vascular aspect of the kidney disease. But still, the leader Pierre-Louis Tarot is a nephrologist by training, okay, but he developed aspect of the vascular aspect of kidney disease. But he is a kidney guy. He is not a cardiovascular guy, okay. But it's very commonly have a number of stories that when we started looking at the role of one cytokine in atherosclerosis, and immediately he tried to see what happened in glomerulonephritis, for instance, okay, and of course that's very, very interesting, and the reverse is true.
Yes. And actually, if we think about renowned international institutes everywhere in the world, they're not restricted to only one field. They're really open to many different, permutations of science. And so I think your strategy was obviously the good one and the winning one. What were the most challenging aspects of running the institute?
I mean, when you have to run, I mean, in a daily condition, I mean, it's it's a problem with human resources, I would say, it's always the case because people believe that the director is having a view on and giving opinion on everything which is done in the center. This is absolutely not correct. I mean, there is and there wasn't. There is a total freedom of research by the team. The only my responsibility was, in fact, that all the common platform, for instance. So that's the responsibility of the director. It's to make decision on which platform we put more efforts to develop. Okay, so that's, yeah, okay, the director may have an opinion as compared to the other team leaders. But otherwise, all the decisions were taken collectively and collegially by the board of team leaders. We had a meeting every month, something like that. And so my responsibility is that, and also to stimulate collaborations, because otherwise the teams are, of course, it's easier to just to keep in your own track and continue. And in a way, my responsibility is to say, you should try, you can look at what this team is doing, and so on, and so and so forth.
So sorry, I just come back. When you say that the human resources, you mean like frictions between people,
Because that exists everywhere.
common things that happen in every.
Common things. So you have to manage, and you have to be always very open-minded.
Yeah.
Solve this kind of. But this is, that's your job, because your job is not to tell, except in my team, but in the other team, my job is not to say, no, I would have, I would not have done as you did. I mean, let me. No, it's not.
Yes, maybe you could be helping in solving the problems, but they had to sort it out. Yes. Yes. And the most rewarding aspects of doing this job.
The most rewarding probably is, when we started, and coming back to the discussion, the discussion regarding what would be the direction of the center, the HEGP, European Georges-Pompidou Center, oncology, cardiovascular, platform, etc., mixed, I mean, multidisciplinary, etc. And at that time, there were already established institute in neuroscience, a number in Paris, in Bordeaux. There were also a number of institutes in oncology and cancer, very famous, Gustave Roussy, Institut Curie. But really, in cardiovascular research, there was at that time one institute in Nantes, Institut du Thorax. Okay, but that's the only one really having a I would say a certain recognition, visibility. Otherwise, there were famous individual units, but not like an institute or center, like an Institute of Neurology, Institut Curie, etc. So, and really, if I can say what I'm the most proud, it's to have made the PARRC recognized abroad. Now, when you go in a meeting, you can just say, I don't know, whatever the name from the PARRC. People in the cardiovascular field, they know that the PARRC is Paris doing that and that and that with those people, and now we have stars at the PARRC with Alexandre Loupy, who is doing artificial intelligence in xenograft and kidney transplant is also absolutely it's the star in his field, and they grew up at the park. So
That's impressive, considering that PARCC really is a very young institute, only
indeed, yeah,
15 years.
In 15 years. In 15 years.
In 15 years, it has become a very renowned and internationally recognized institute. And I think France has to be very, very proud of this achievement. And as far as I can see, also by looking at the publications, I think it's just keep going up and up. You were mentioning Ziad Malad. I saw recently these papers in Nature about young children already.
Two papers in Nature, Acid Pilar and Ziad Mala in the same issue of Nature, absolutely.
I saw that.
But also Alexandre Loupy just published a New England Journal of Medicine paper. And so that, but that was also one point that I insisted a lot when I took over the directionship of the park, is I really privileged the quality over the quantity. And I always say, okay, just publish a good paper. Doesn't matter if it's one a year or one every year. Doesn't matter. It's really much better than having, a 10 paper in subspecialty journals where, okay, it's fine. I mean, it's good science, but it's not breakthrough. It's not, okay. So, and that, I mean, they all consider that. And I mean, it's a kind, not competition, but this is something like a spirit. You have
drive.
It's absolutely, it's a drive, and that it took much longer because to have a paper in Nature or Nature Medicine or in such a journal, JCI, they ask you for a lot of, so it can take 3, 4, 5 years instead of in 1 year. You just publish your observation and that's it. But that even I mean, it cannot be in a high-ranking journal. It would be in a subspecialty journal. So that's also the spirit of the park, and it now it works quite well because most articles are published in I would say generalist journals, Nature Communications, not always Nature, but Nature Communications, JCI. Lancet for those who have access to this
More
kind
clinical, yeah.
clinical oriented, yeah.
It's a strategy that is paying off.
It was a strategy because we said stop trying to publish every month or every year, doesn't matter. In your, because you always can publish the science is good, no problem. I mean, all teams are doing very good science, very novel things. So you always have the possibility to publish your work in a specialty, even though high ranking specialty journals, but just try to a level
To aim high.
to aim higher, yeah, and
Yeah.
to aim for quality. I mean, it's not just for to publish in Nature, but just because it also goes with the quality of the work. It's the kind of institute like the park. I mean, the research that you expect to be done, it's not just a me too, even though it's a good science, but it cannot be me too. The government invests a lot. We have grown from Europe. We have grown from foundations that count on us. So it should be definitely novel. I mean, it should be discovery what things that have not been already discovered, and not just say, okay, yeah, I also can do me. It's a me too research.
Excellent. So this leads me to this question. Obviously, the scientists you chose have this drive. They understand the spirit of the institute, but they themselves have their own ambitions. How did you choose them? What did you see? What did you search in these people that you wanted to recruit, you wanted to attract at your institute?
So, I mean, historically, the very first teams, the 8 teams that just created the park in 2009, okay,
Yes.
there were 3 from Collège de France with Xavier Jeanmaître, who was supposed in any way to leave. He had to leave Collège de France, and my unit subdivided in 3 teams plus a imaging Olivier Clément, who was chief of radiology, who runs the MRI machine. So that, and Xavier Jouven, who also he was in Villejuif. He's a cardiologist, epidemiologist. Okay, so that was a 3, and 2, the 8 teams that constitute the core of
Yes.
back at the beginning. But and then after we received proposals, okay, to join. So in fact, how it works is mainly we recruited 2 ATIP Avenir, young researchers or emergency in
Yes.
emergence teams. Okay, so that 2 teams joined us, and in fact they became full unit, infirm unit at the next term.
Evaluation.
Next evaluation. So that was 99. That was the first, and then 1914. 1914. So that also, and also by splitting very large team. For instance, Xavier Jeanmaître, when he came from the Collège de France, his own team was subdivided in 3 groups, okay? And then at the next term, the 3 split into 3 units, all very famous with activity, and they were recognized by INSERM as individual teams. So that's how we grow up from 8 to first to 11 in 2014 to 11, and then the term after was 14, because we recruited again by recruiting 80 partners. Was always by recruiting young fellows.
Yes. So you could see they had this, they were promising people that could give a lot to the institute and could develop very, very new research avenues to be able to publish in these, to discovering very important things, first of all, and second, to really be able to publish in these high impact journals. Reflecting on your many years as director, is there something that you are very proud of? And I suppose you said you retired 3 years ago, you left a legacy. What is the legacy, the most important legacy that you think you left for all the new directors that came after you?
I think it's really continue to do good science. And for instance, just as a joke, I was Jean-Sébastien Silva, the new director, had the evaluation by the HCRS agency, okay, last year, because last year or 18 months ago, okay, and again, the question was, as you know, you are now well recognized. You're doing very good research, but what is your own vision on what should be done? In a way, what why you don't yourself as a director tell the team leader what they should do? And Jean-Sébastien say, no, I mean, I'm the director, and as the previous Alain Tedgui, I mean, what I want to do is I just check that good science is done, but it's not my responsibility to tell the group in hypertension, I'm not an expert, what he or she has to do. So that's the legacy, is, the legacy of always having looking at maintaining the level of good science, which means good science means it's not only by by orgueil. How do you say orgueil?
Being proud.
Yeah,
Pride.
yeah, yeah. But just because, I mean, as a Inserm Institute, our responsibility is to discover what has not been already discovered. Otherwise, I mean, we are doing, it's not research. It's travaux pratiques, like you do at the university. It's not research.
Again, in my interpretation of all what you are saying is that your legacy was to, first of all, give the right environment, the right philosophy, the right approach for the teams that were working in your institute. And at the same time, something which I think is very precious for scientists, the freedom to explore within this framework of cardiovascular disease, to explore really what was the most important thing that these leaders thought they wanted to explore and develop. So I think it's it's a very, very productive recipe for success, because sometimes, for example, I'm thinking about the fact that when there are calls, grants, we have to write projects that need to be funded, and sometimes we have this constriction that we have to work on a specific subject because the grant body wants us to develop a project on this subject, which is understandable from from a
The funder
political point of view. Exactly. But at the same time, I always think that the people who won the Nobel Prizes, they really did and explore what was their passion.
absolutely.
And this is why they became so good, and they, because they had a passion, they really were motivated to study this and to really understand what was going on in this particular field that they were investigating. So I would say that the freedom that you gave these scientists contributed dramatically, I think, to the development of the spirit of the institute and to the excellence of the institute.
No, you're absolutely correct. Thank you for summarizing as you did, because that's absolutely perfect. Because I forgot the word freedom of research, but that's absolutely essential, and especially in our national system, in the French system, in which that the researchers are civil servants. Okay, so that is real. In a way, it might be quite constraining, but in other way, I mean, we have to use that freedom of research to do at least uh, in the unit, doing exactly what you want to do, and we have just to give report of what we have done before. So that for the evaluation as at INSERM, but of course, as you said, to raise funds and to get a grant, we have to make a project which is focused with work package 1, work package 2, work package 3. Okay, so that's it. But fortunately, I mean, if we were in a private institute with only money coming from foundations or associations, the only way to function is, is to make project after project in a direction. But at INSERM, as we do have the freedom of research, and we have to use it. And that's absolutely essential. And I mean, it's not the case in the US, for instance. They have to, they all the work. Always based on grants, error one, error, etc. And that, of course, they can move bit aside the project because fortunately the scientists are quite smart, but they don't have the freedom that we have here. Or, for instance, in Germany, the Max Planck Institute, that's the same model as in CERN. Okay, they have a certain budget at the beginning of the year, and then you do and that we have to use it. I mean, it's a treasure.
Yes, it's a very positive thing. Given your considerable experience, how do you see the current climate in research and science? You started many years ago, and we have seen an evolution. How do you see the current situation?
I mean, to be not too pessimistic, I would say that the French, I would say that the French, at least in medical science, okay, because I don't know in physics and so on, but I mean, in biomedical science, what we do in France with the amount of money that we have is quite remarkable. However, if we look in terms of tendency, it might be quite, we might be quite pessimistic. Because if we compare, for instance, what in cardiovascular, because that's what I know, in cardiovascular research, if you compare how much is invested in UK, for instance, per inhabitant, in UK is €7, when in France is €1. In Germany, it's €2. In Holland, in Netherlands, it's €4. Okay, so inevitably, that kind of investment will have effect on the long-term research activity. There is no way,
No doubt.
no doubt about that.
Yes.
So still, if you compare, I mean, the French cardiovascular researchers are still in the competition, but definitely when you compare what has been invested in Germany, for instance, with the Center of Excellence, the Cardiovascular Center of Excellence, the government invest in cardiovascular, they invest €40 million per year in cardiovascular. If you do the comparison with what INSERM invest in the 10, 12, 15 unit working in cardiovascular, it's something like a few millions.
Yes.
Nothing to do with 40.
There is no comparison. Yes, absolutely. And as you say, let's look at the positive, the fact that considering the more limited funding,
Yeah.
the results are still remarkable. Yes, it's
The French cardiovascular researchers are still in the competition, but the question is for how long?
yeah, the question is for how long? What's the prediction? Yes, let's be hopeful.
No, let's be hopeful.
Yes. So my last question, how would you encourage the young generation to embark in a scientific career? You are the one who can tell us, not me specifically, but the very young people. What would you tell them to motivate them?
Just to tell them that it's enjoyable activity in which you have enthusiasm. I mean, the fact to discover something that nobody before you had discovered, that's something which is absolutely fascinating and give you a lot of joy and a lot of happiness when it arrives. Researcher, of course, you need creativity, okay? But it's not like a painter. It's not like an artist. An artist makes things that did not exist. It's totally come from their mind. The researchers, what is fascinating is we also discover and we create, but we create and discover what already exists, but that nobody else before you has discovered. And that is something that is absolutely fascinating and brought you a lot of joy.
Yes, despite the hard work.
despite the hard work, and also despite the fact that, what also I say is not all individuals can support the failure, because there are a lot of failure. You imagine, because of course what we publish and what we discuss is only successes, okay, only success. But in our work, on a daily basis, the number of cases where you imagine an experiment, you did that, and you prepare it, you treat the mice, and it take months, and after 3 months, 6 months, it happened, and
No.
nothing. It was not the good idea. It didn't work for any reason. So you have to be able to support l'échec, failure.
Yes.
And that's something I myself was in contact with, young researchers who were definitely not done for that job, just because they did not support the the experiment do not work.
Yes. I think that's a great way of finishing, to tell them that you need resilience, you need this ability
Absolutely.
to withstand the failures that are very common, starting from the experiments to writing and trying to publish papers, to try to get money to do the science, and so on. I think it was really fascinating, Alain. I'm very glad that you gave us these very, very important insights into the work and the job that is being a director of an institute. And I think one thing that I really appreciated is to see how you are, the science for you is the driving. You were a director, but everything is revolving around science, and is not administration. It's a science and research. And probably because you yourself have this passion, you were able to transmit this into the teams and the people that were working around you. And I think it is part of the success of the institute. So
No.
thank you again.
I fully agree with what you said. I definitely believe that, a director of a scientific center or institute cannot be a pure manager.
Yes.
He has to be a he has to be a scientist. Otherwise, it's just like any trade
It's a
activity.
sterile. It's
It's eventually definitely sterilizing. Absolutely, you're right. So the director must be a scientist, a pure scientist,
and very interested in it.
with a management. With I had a very, very, very serious, very good, and very appreciated managing director, and that was also very important, because I definitely rely on him, and he did a lot of work that I really didn't want to do.
Yes. Excellent.
Okay,
Thank you so much, Alain.
thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.